Most people will not believe this until the consequences are already underway. But America has quietly crossed the threshold into a phase of national decline that almost no empire in history has ever climbed back out of. The signals are subtle, the mood is uneasy, and the shift is happening beneath the surface of ordinary life. Yet the data, the history, and the patterns all tell the same story. The United States has entered stage 5, not the beginning of trouble, not a temporary slowdown, not a problem that can be solved by a single election or a single policy, but the structural point where decline becomes self-reinforcing. The strange thing about stage 5 is that it does not feel catastrophic at first. It feels familiar, like a slightly more difficult version of the world people have already grown used to. But that is exactly why it is so dangerous. Collapse does not begin with chaos. It begins with normalization, with the quiet belief that everything is manageable even as the ground shifts under your feet. Stay with me. Because once you understand the full map of national decline and where America sits on that map right now, you will see the future with unsettling clarity. My name is Marcus Blackwell. I am not a financial advisor, but I uncover the truth behind global finance, the hidden instability, the currency decay, and the slow structural cracks most people never see coming. My mission is simple: to help you understand what is unfolding, prepare before the headlines hit, and remain financially unbreakable while others are caught off guard. History offers warnings, but it also offers patterns. And once you see those patterns, you will no longer be surprised by the events unfolding around you. Here we look at the world not through emotion or politics, but through cycles, data, and historical memory. And the cycle now points to one conclusion: the United States has entered stage 5. Before we go further into the story, the history, and the implications for your future, you need to see the stage map clearly. Every empire, every dominant currency, every global economic power has moved through these stages. The timing changes, the technology changes, the culture changes, but the underlying mechanics do not. What follows is the framework historians and analysts have used for generations to understand how dominant powers rise, peak, overextend, fracture, and ultimately transform. I will lay it out exactly as it appears in the historical record, integrated directly into this narrative so you can see precisely how America reached this point. The stage map unfolds like this in a single continuous arc. Stage 1 is the rise, the period when a nation builds real economic strength, develops productive capacity, accumulates capital, and earns global trust. Industries expand, innovation accelerates, and the currency becomes a reliable store of value. For America, this was the industrial boom of the early 20th century, when manufacturing dominance and a gold-backed currency created unparalleled trust around the world. Stage 2 is the peak, the moment when a nation enjoys the highest level of prosperity and influence. Wealth expands, the middle class flourishes, consumption rises, and optimism feels permanent. America lived this in the decades following the Second World War, when the dollar became the backbone of global trade. Stage 3 is the overextension, the point where spending outpaces revenue, debt grows faster than productivity, and governments turn to borrowing and monetary expansion to maintain the illusion of stability. Political incentives shift from discipline to convenience. America entered this period in the late 20th century when debt-financed growth replaced real productivity gains. Stage 4 is the institutional decay, the slow erosion of trust, the widening wealth gap, the increasing polarization, and the growing dependence on financial engineering to sustain a lifestyle the economy can no longer organically produce. This is the era of asset bubbles, stagnant wages, political division, central bank intervention, and rising social stress. And then comes Stage 5. Stage 5 is the reckoning, the phase where the foundations crack under the weight of previous stages. Debt service consumes national revenue. The currency weakens structurally. Inflation becomes permanent rather than temporary. Global trust fades. Social cohesion fractures. And the population senses something irreversible beneath the surface, even if they cannot articulate it. This is the full stage map: rise, peak, overextension, institutional decay, reckoning, It repeats across civilizations. It shapes the trajectory of global powers, and the United States now stands firmly in Stage 5. Now that you understand the structure, let me show you how America arrived here and what Stage 5 looks like when viewed through the lens of history. When the Roman Empire reached Stage 5, the first sign was hidden in its currency. Leaders diluted the silver content of Roman coins to pay for wars, debts, and administrative costs. People did not notice the debasement at first, but wages weakened, prices rose, and trust slowly evaporated. When Weimar Germany reached Stage 5, the warning sign appeared in its debt obligations. The government could no longer pay what it owed in real terms, so it printed money faster than the economy could absorb it. The population believed the inflation was temporary until the currency collapsed entirely. When the Soviet Union reached Stage 5, the signal came through systemic inefficiency. Productivity died, central planning failed, and the government concealed the decay until the structure collapsed in a sudden and global shock. The pattern changes in the details, but not in the trajectory. Stage 5 is not the moment of collapse. It is the moment when collapse becomes mathematically unavoidable unless radical and unlikely reforms reset the system. America is now experiencing its own Stage 5, shaped by modern institutions and modern pressures. One of the clearest markers is the national debt. Not just the size of it, but the behavior of it. The United States now spends hundreds of billions of dollars every year on interest alone, a number that increases automatically as debt expands and interest rates rise. This is the same self-reinforcing loop that crippled empires throughout history. Once a nation reaches the point where servicing old debt requires taking on new debt faster than economic growth, the system becomes structurally unstable. This is not politics. This is mathematics, and mathematics does not negotiate. But Stage 5 is not defined solely by the government balance sheet. It shows itself in the daily lives of ordinary citizens. When the average family cannot afford a home, when wages stagnate while prices rise, when people work more but feel poorer, when food, energy, healthcare, and housing all become financial stress points, that is the societal expression of Stage 5. These are not isolated symptoms. These are structural signals. Let me show you something few people talk about. Inflation may appear lower today than it did during its peak, but the damage is permanent. The price level has not returned to where it was. It has reset higher, creating a new baseline that wages cannot catch up to. This is textbook Stage 5 behavior. It is the silent erosion of purchasing power. It is the quiet theft of future prosperity. And it is the same pattern that appeared in every empire entering its reckoning phase. Here's where the story becomes even more compelling. Around the world, major economies have begun shifting away from the United States dollar in global trade. This process, known as de-dollarization, does not occur suddenly. It occurs gradually, then accelerates. Central banks across continents are accumulating gold at levels not seen in modern financial history. Nations are forging new trade agreements that bypass the United States currency entirely. These moves are not symbolic. They are strategic. They reflect a global doubt about the long-term stability of the dollar, a doubt that emerges only in Stage 5 moments. And yet the most important indicator is not financial or geopolitical. It is psychological. Stage 5 is the moment when people begin to sense that something fundamental is changing, even if the surface appears calm. You can feel it in the tension of daily life, in the frustration of citizens, in the polarization of politics, in the loss of faith in institutions. You can feel it when people talk more about surviving than thriving, when long-term plans feel uncertain, when optimism fades into caution. This emotional shift is not random. It is the final marker of a society deep in Stage 5. But here's the part nobody talks about. Stage 5 is not the end. It is the turning point. It is the moment before the reset, the moment before transformation. And while nations struggle in Stage 5, individuals who understand the cycle can position themselves ahead of the shift. That is why you are here. That is why this conversation matters. Because history does not only warn, it teaches. And those who understand its lessons are the ones who remain steady while others panic. Now that we have traced how America entered Stage 5, let us examine the core forces accelerating it, because Stage 5 is never caused by a single factor. It is the convergence of multiple unsustainable trends that begin to reinforce one another. Debt feeds inflation. Inflation feeds social resentment. Social resentment feeds political instability. Political instability feeds poor governance. Poor governance feeds more debt. This is the self-amplifying loop that every declining empire faces when it reaches the later stages of its cycle. When Rome diluted its silver coinage, inflation weakened its economy, which led to tax increases, which led to rebellion, which led to more military spending, which led to even further debasement. When the British Empire entered its late-stage decline, the cost of maintaining global presence exceeded its productive output, forcing relentless borrowing and eventual surrender of reserve currency status. When the Ottoman Empire approached its final century, corruption, inefficiency, and debt combined into a spiral that no reform could reverse. America is not exempt from this pattern. It is living it. Let us begin with the banking system. Right now, commercial banks across the country are holding enormous portfolios of loans tied to commercial real estate, particularly office buildings that remain half-empty years after the global shift to remote work. The value of these buildings has fallen, but the loans behind them remain. As refinancing becomes harder and interest rates remain elevated, banks face rising pressure. A wave of defaults in this sector could weaken large financial institutions and strain smaller ones to the breaking point. We do not need to imagine how this ends. We have seen it before. The 1980s savings and loan crisis, the 2008 housing crash, the European banking crisis after 2011. Each followed the same pattern. Borrowers struggle, lenders panic, liquidity dries up, and the financial system trembles. Stage 5 amplifies this risk because the government has far less fiscal flexibility to contain a crisis than it did in earlier stages. Now look at household debt. Across the country, families are relying on credit cards, auto loans, and personal loans at levels that would have been unimaginable 2 decades ago. Not because people are reckless, but because the cost of living has climbed faster than wages. Food, rent, insurance, medical care, utilities, transportation, and housing have all risen to levels that stretch household budgets thin. This pressure does not create immediate collapse. It creates slow degradation. It creates the sensation of falling behind, no matter how hard one works. And that is exactly how Stage 5 feels to ordinary citizens. It is not chaos. It is exhaustion. But the most significant trend is the structural decline of the dollar's unique global supremacy. For nearly 80 years, nations around the world depended on the United States dollar for trade, savings, and reserves. That dependence allowed America to borrow at low cost, print money without catastrophic consequences, and maintain influence in global markets. But Stage 5 brings doubt. For the first time in modern history, major powers are conducting significant trade in their own currencies. Regional alliances are rising. Gold accumulation has surged. These moves reflect a global shift away from a single dominant financial center toward a more fragmented system. Once this shift accelerates, the United States will face rising borrowing costs, reduced global influence, and a currency that must stand on its fundamentals rather than its legacy. This is not speculation. It is historical precedent. And then there is the social dimension, the one that almost every collapsing empire underestimated. When trust erodes, the system fractures from within. You can measure the erosion numerically through institutional trust surveys, voter dissatisfaction, declining civic participation, and rising polarization. But you can also feel it emotionally. People no longer believe the system works for them. They no longer believe the future will be better than the past. When younger generations doubt they will ever own a home, have children, or retire comfortably, that is a fundamental breakdown in the societal contract. Every empire reaches this emotional tipping point before its structural change. Rome reached it when citizens lost faith in the integrity of their leaders. The Soviet Union reached it when people stopped believing official economic data. America is approaching it now as individuals grow increasingly skeptical of institutions, media, government, and even each other. The emotional decline precedes the structural break. But here is the part most analysts miss. Stage 5 is not a death sentence. It is a moment of clarity. It reveals the weaknesses that were hidden in Stage 3 and Stage 4. It exposes the unsustainable promises. It shows the true cost of decades of imbalance. And because it reveals these truths, it provides a rare opportunity for individuals to prepare and reposition themselves before the system transitions into Stage 6, the reset. Stage 6 is not collapse. It is transition. It is the moment when the old order buckles and a new structure begins to form. Sometimes the reset is violent. Sometimes it is political. Sometimes it is economic. Sometimes it is slow. Sometimes it is sudden. But it is always transformative. And those who understand the nature of the reset can protect themselves, their families, and their future, while others scramble to make sense of what is happening. The wise prepare before the transition. The unprepared panic once it arrives. So how does one prepare? The answer is not fear. The answer is strategy. The first step is diversification. History shows that individuals who hold all their assets within a single currency or a single system are the ones most vulnerable during transitions. Whether it was the Roman citizen holding only debased coins, the Weimar citizen with only cash savings, or the Soviet citizen with only state-issued investments, the pattern is always the same. Concentration is fragility. Diversification is resilience. This can take many modern forms: building multiple income streams, developing skills that remain valuable even in turbulent economies, holding a mix of assets rather than relying on a single financial instrument, reducing unnecessary debt, preparing for volatility instead of assuming stability. The second step is awareness. Understand the cycles, study the patterns, recognize the signals that others ignore. When a nation enters Stage 5, the window for preparation remains open, but it does not stay open forever. There is still time now, but that time diminishes as the structural pressures grow. The world is shifting toward a new economic order, and the nations and individuals who adapt the fastest will experience the least hardship. The third step is psychological discipline. Do not allow panic to dictate your decisions. Stage 5 creates anxiety, but anxiety does not solve problems. Clarity does. The individuals who thrive during transformations are the ones who remain calm, while others become emotional. It is not courage that enables this. It is understanding. It is the knowledge that the cycle is predictable, that the patterns are historical, and that preparation is the antidote to fear. Let us return for a moment to the stage map because it provides the clearest lens through which to view the future. Stage 1 was America's rise, when industry, innovation, and productivity made it the world's economic engine. Stage 2 was its peak, when prosperity and global trust reached unmatched heights. Stage 3 was its overextension, when debt, consumption, and political promises began to outgrow the underlying economy. Stage 4 was its institutional decay, when polarization, inequality, and financial engineering replaced unity, discipline, and productivity. Stage 5 is its reckoning, the moment where the consequences of earlier choices become unavoidable. And Stage 6 is its reset, the transition to whatever comes next. Some nations emerge stronger after Stage 6. Others do not. The outcome depends not on luck, but on preparation. You are living through a moment that future historians will write about for generations. You are witnessing the late stages of a dominant nation's financial arc. Most people cannot see it. They are too close to the daily noise to recognize the deeper pattern. But you are seeing beyond the surface. And because you see it, you can prepare. What comes next will challenge assumptions. It will test systems. It will reshape the economic world. But those who understand the cycle are never surprised by its results. When you understand the past, the future stops being frightening. It becomes predictable. And remember this: the wise prepare quietly while the unprepared panic for all to see.